In this short video, I was going to show you guys how to make a obsidian desert side notched arrowhead. Now, I'd made a video on this topic a couple years ago, but I figured it'd be good to revisit this subject, get a little bit more modernized version, updated, and also, what the heck, I just think they're super cool arrowheads and I wanted to make one, so I figured let's make a video and I'll share it with you guys. But before we get into it, of course, we have to look at some authentic artifacts. I took the glass cover off of that case so you guys could see. And there's a measuring tape up above for size reference. See, a lot of those things are really small. Now there's some points up there in the top row that look like they're made out of agate or flint of some kind. Vast majority of them though are made of obsidian. And look at how little that thing is. Fits right on my finger. Really not big at all, just surprisingly small little points. That little guy, just little things, but that's what those old guys were using to hunt with. You know, their lives depended on this stuff. They weren't kidding around, so if those little points were capable of betting your life on, I believe we can do the same. So to start off, we're just going to use some really small, thin little obsidian flakes. I've seen a number of those points that actually have the original flake surface on them. They're not even covered with flake scars. So I think that's probably right in line with what the old guys were doing is what we're going to do here. Just take some small, thin obsidian flakes that are conveniently shaped and about the same size you want, maybe a little bit bigger, and then just make the points out of them. So let's get going. So I'm going to attempt to use all aboriginal antler and primitive tools today. So just use the edge of my flaker to crunch that edge in. Now, I don't know if the old guys used this technique, but it wouldn't surprise me if they did. It's just a very quick, efficient way to make arrowheads. Don't waste a lot of material. And you're pretty efficient with your time as well. Well, I've often wondered, I don't think the old guys were as pressed for time as we are in our modern world. And time really wasn't that much of an issue to them. It was just something they had to do, so. There's our basic preform. We'll refine that later. I'll crunch out a few more blanks. A thicker point is definitely more durable when it comes to impacts and maintaining integrity if you happen to hit a bone or something, but a lot of those points are really well made. I'll tell you, those northern Paiute hunters, they're very skilled flint knappers. I've seen some of those desert side notch points are just covered with these beautifully executed flake scars. These oblique parallel flake scars just go all the way across the surface of the point. Not very pretty, but I'll finish that up later. Alright, let's do one more. I'm going to try something a little different on this flake. I'm going to actually use this gritty river cobble, which doubles as an abrading stone. I'm going to use this as a flaker. It's got a little bit more of a bite to it. Because it's gritty, it grips the edge of that obsidian. Pressure flaking with a little cobble. But well, sometimes I think it's a little better because it's a little harder. It almost, that antler tends to grab a little bit too much and put more bending stresses on the flake. So All right, just a roughed out piece, but that's what we'll build our points off of. Here I'm using just a little split deer leg bone. And be really careful about taking off those flakes. Trying to get it much more even now. A little light abrading on that one. Don't want to go real heavy when you abrade that edge. Just very, very light, enough to knock the sharpness down. You don't need to build up a lot of pressure on these things. You just want that flake that edge to be just strong enough to support the pressure, so that when you press that flake off, it just snaps right off, and that's it. Man, this is so hard to shoot this and film and chip this at the same time, because I'm at this weird, awkward angle. Trying to give you guys a view so you can see what's going on there. And hear that, how it just snaps. Every time you press a flake off, it snaps. It's a good sign. Just means that your edge is prepared just right. Let's start on one corner and gently press them in. That worked. One more series of flakes down this edge. Actually, I'll be careful there around that tip. It's so fragile. Alright, now I'll start at the base. I wonder if the old guys probably did something similar. You know, they just crunched it like that, got it roughed out, and maybe towards the end they sent their flakes over the surface just as a final dress up to the point to even it out. So I got the little arrowhead preforms done. All we have to do is notch them. Man, they're little things, but they're really cool. And I just love these little arrowheads. So we're going to notch them next, but I couldn't really show the final finishing and flaking, what I was doing with those final series of flakes, because man, I was trying to, and I'm twisted up like this, like a dang pretzel, trying to show you, and I've got them like this so that you guys can see. But the problem is that I'm completely out of my normal position of comfort and control, and I was afraid I might break these things, so I didn't want to do that. So I had to resort to just close-up work and kind of camera be damned. But anyway, they're done. I'm going to show you now how we notch these things. A lot of those points had a notch right in the base, just like a little Cahokia point. Very common. Crunch that notch out a little bit with that tool. You could also even use a small obsidian flake or a flint flake. Well, that's fine. Fine work in there. You gotta really keep your tool dressed when you're doing these fine points like this, because if that tool gets dull, you can end up crushing that edge and cause a failure in that notch. So that little point doesn't require much as far as notches. And because it's so small, I bet you it probably doesn't require a lot of sinew wrapping in there either. So you don't have to put a real heavy sinew wrap over these points because they're so small. They don't seem to really be subjected to as much force as you would think. Cool, that little guy's done. Got one more to do. Put those notches right up there. You want your tool to only contact the very bottom of the notch, not the edges on either side like that. Because if you do, you can split the point in half. Well, I had to put them on a white sheet of paper so you could actually see them, because they're pretty transparent, being as small and as thin as they are. But there are the finished obsidian desert side notch points. And look at how little they are. And that's my thumbnail. And this little one too. Just little tiny points. But those are ones you see in the archaeological record. And just like the ones I showed you earlier, I'm going to go lay these in with those old ones. We're going to see how they compare in size. There's the three I just made. And we back out. They're in with all those other authentic points. And they're they fit perfectly in there as far as size and shape, design. They look just like the originals. I mean, look at that. As far as like size comparison, can't get any closer than that, really. It's really cool to make these and show them, put them right up against the originals, and they just match perfectly. Now, before we close this video out, just wanted to show you, this is a replica Northern Paiute hunting arrow. This is actually one of my own personal hunting arrows, and it is tipped with a small obsidian arrowhead. Now that is the obsidian point, and here's the one we made today. So right in line with the size of the arrowheads that we made today, this authentic replica is what was used in the Great Basin for hunting big game. All you'd have to do is get that arrow in about that deep, even just to the foreshaft junction where it fits into this main shaft. You get it in that deep, you've got both lungs on a deer or a pronghorn. And that's what they used. These desert side notch points are hafted to greasewood foreshafts and are a perfect representation of Great Basin hunting equipment. Their small size and insanely sharp edges are perfectly designed for deep penetration on large game. If you want to learn how to make an authentic Great Basin bow and arrow, check out my latest video on the Northern Paiute bow and arrows. It's available on my website, primitivepathways.com.